If Lucas was so confident in replacing Elena with his new fiancée as CEO, why did he freeze when the city's most powerful billionaire publicly chose Elena instead? Was it because he underestimated the one woman who knew all his secrets? No one who attended the Harrington Foundation's annual charity gala that night would ever forget it. Not because of the 5-tiered cake, or the violinists flown in from Paris, or the fact that every guest received a custom diamond pin just for showing up. No, this night would go down in Manhattan legend for something far juicier. Because this was the night when Lucas Harrington, darling of Wall Street, stood at the heart of the Rose Crown Hotel's ballroom and did something so bold, so unexpectedly cold-blooded, it made even New York's richest matrons pause mid-sip of their 1996 Dom Perignon. The room shimmered with wealth. Glistening chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls overhead, painting rainbows on the parquet floor. The air smelled like peonies and new money. Waiters in white gloves glided between hedge fund titans and actresses, topping off glasses, offering bites of caviar toast. All the power brokers were there. Venture capitalists, magazine editors, board members. And at the center of it all, perfectly backlit by the stage lights, stood Lucas. Lucas was every inch the golden boy. Broad-shouldered, sharp-jawed, a tuxedo hanging perfectly from his frame. He was the kind of man who looked as though he had been born to command attention. He flashed a practiced smile as he leaned into the microphone, his voice echoing through the cavernous hall. Thank you all for coming. I'm proud to celebrate another year of the Harrington Foundation's mission and thrilled to share some exciting news about the company's future. He paused, letting the anticipation ripple through the guests. Beside him, her hand lightly gripping his arm, was Alyssa Carter. Only 28, Alyssa looked like the future itself. Sleek, ambitious, and stunning in a white tailored suit that made her stand out like a queen among debutantes. Alyssa flashed a bright calculated smile as Lucas pulled her closer. I'd like to introduce my fiancée, Alyssa Carter, the next CEO of Harrington Innovations. The announcement exploded through the room. There was a collective inhale, a shudder of surprise, a barely perceptible ripple of envy and judgment. Some people clapped, unsure whether to cheer or be scandalized. Others exchanged pointed glances. The whispers began immediately. Alyssa? CEO? What about Elena? But Lucas looked invincible, basking in the shock he'd just delivered. He had always loved spectacle, but tonight he was putting on the show of his life. Alyssa, meanwhile, met every stare with defiant pride, as if she'd already won. But across the ballroom, beneath the glow of a crystal chandelier, a new arrival had just slipped in, unnoticed at first by most, but not by everyone. Elena Grant, Lucas's ex-wife. 2 years ago, Elena had been banished from this world, her life unraveling under the relentless gaze of the same society that now toasted her replacement. After a public, humiliating divorce, Elena disappeared from Manhattan's social scene. Rumors swirled. Some said she'd run off to Europe. Others whispered she'd had a breakdown. Tonight, nobody expected to see her. Yet there she was, wearing a simple black dress, hair swept back, her features composed, calm, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with wealth or status. She did not wear a smile, but she radiated a quiet strength, the kind forged in fire. A few old friends tried to catch her eye, but Elena walked past them, every step measured. She made her way toward the edge of the room, where a silver-haired man was waiting with a smile. Gregory Maddox, billionaire investor, rarely seen in public, and even more rarely seen with company. Yet tonight he seemed delighted to greet Elena, leaning in as if to share a secret. Guests noticed. Whispers grew louder. Lucas saw them too. The confident mask on his face flickered for just a second. Alyssa squeezed his hand, but Lucas didn't move. He just watched as Gregory led Elena to the front of the room, motioning to the event MC. There was a ripple of confusion as the orchestra stopped playing. Gregory stepped forward, his deep, authoritative voice cutting through the tension. Excuse me, everyone. Before we continue, I'd like to make an introduction of my own. Tonight, I have the privilege of announcing someone who has shown extraordinary vision, resilience, and leadership. I am proud to name Elena Grant as the new CEO of Maddox Global Enterprises' next venture. For a split second, the entire room froze. Not a glass clinked, not a phone camera flashed. Elena stood beside Gregory, chin high, eyes clear, the embodiment of dignity. The shock on Lucas's face was unmistakable. Alyssa's hand slipped from his arm. People began murmuring. A few people started to applaud, then more, until the room was echoing with a standing ovation that no one, including Elena herself, had expected. It was the ultimate reversal. The woman Lucas had dismissed, whom society had counted out, now stood taller than ever, endorsed by the city's most powerful kingmaker, given a platform far bigger than anything Lucas could offer. Elena didn't smile, but she didn't have to. Her presence, her poise, said everything. Tonight wasn't about revenge, not yet, but it was about the world seeing the real Elena Grant for the first time. And as Lucas watched her from the shadows of his own gala, he realized with growing dread that the game had changed. And this time, he wasn't the one holding all the cards. Elena Grant hadn't always belonged to the shadows. Once, not so long ago, she'd been the golden girl of Manhattan's social elite. She was Lucas's wife, the one people called elegant, charming, the kind of woman who makes everyone in the room feel seen. Her wedding had graced the pages of society magazines. Her dinner parties were where deals were made, fortunes forged, and secrets traded behind perfect smiles. But if you looked past the polished exterior, Elena's life was never as simple as it seemed. She was the only child of immigrant parents who'd worked 3 jobs to send her to Columbia. She'd grown up in a tiny walk-up apartment, sharing a bed with her mother while her father worked late shifts driving a cab. Elena learned early that survival depended on keeping her head down, working twice as hard, and never asking for help. By the time she'd earned her MBA, she was fluent in the unspoken language of power, the art of making others feel important while never exposing her own vulnerabilities. She met Lucas Harrington at a benefit for underprivileged youth, back when she was working as a junior analyst for a midtown consulting firm. Lucas swept into her life like a tidal wave, witty, brilliant, and so used to getting his way that resistance seemed pointless. He dazzled her with rooftop dinners, weekend getaways to Paris, and promises that he'd always protect her. To the world, they looked perfect together. He with his old money pedigree, she with her hard-earned grace. Their wedding was the stuff of fairy tales. A summer ceremony in the Hamptons, sunlight glinting off Elena's diamond ring, Lucas whispering vows about forever. For a while, Elena let herself believe that she belonged in this new world. She hosted fundraisers, volunteered on nonprofit boards, and tried to be the flawless wife everyone expected. But behind closed doors, the cracks were already showing. Lucas was charming, but he was also controlling. Subtly at first, then more aggressively as his career soared. He expected Elena to be available for every dinner, every event, every public display of marital bliss. If she questioned him, he called her ungrateful. If she worked late or missed a call, he accused her of caring more about her job than her marriage. Elena learned to apologize, to keep the peace, to let Lucas believe he was always right. Her own dreams shrank, quietly packed away like childhood toys. By the time she turned 35, she'd left her job, devoting herself full-time to Lucas's world. She became a professional hostess, a shadow at his side, her own identity fading more with every passing gala. The end came quickly, as these things often do. A tabloid photo of Lucas with a younger woman, Alyssa Carter, an ambitious upstart from a rival firm, sparked whispers. Lucas denied everything, swearing it was business. But Elena saw the late-night texts, the credit card charges for gifts she'd never received, the distance in his eyes. She asked for honesty. Lucas gave her ultimatums. "If you can't trust me, maybe you're not cut out for this life," he'd said coldly one night, after yet another public event where he'd barely spoken to her. "Don't embarrass me, Elena. I have a reputation to protect." In the end, it was Elena who filed for divorce. She thought Lucas would fight to keep her, that he'd realize what he was losing. Instead, he moved out before the ink was dry, letting his lawyers do the talking. The settlement was brutal. Lucas's team ensured that every asset, every investment, was tied up in ways Elena couldn't touch. Friends she'd known for years stopped returning her calls. She was replaced at charity boards. Invitations dried up overnight. The city that once felt like home turned cold and silent. Elena rented a tiny studio downtown, trading her designer wardrobe for simple sweaters and jeans. She took freelance consulting gigs to pay the bills, kept her head down, and tried not to think about everything she'd lost. Nights were the hardest, lying awake in the darkness, replaying the choices that had led her here. Sometimes she wondered if Lucas was right, if she'd asked for too much, if she'd been foolish to hope for real love in a world where everything had a price. But pain can be a teacher, and loss a brutal gift. As the months passed, Elena found a stubborn ember inside her, the part of her that had survived her childhood, that had fought for every scrap of success. She started running every morning, letting the city's rhythm steady her nerves. She kept a journal, filling pages with the truth she'd never been allowed to speak. She found comfort in small things: a good book, the kindness of a stranger, the quiet pride of earning her own paycheck again. Slowly, Elena built herself back up. She refused to let bitterness win. She volunteered at a legal aid clinic for women starting over after divorce, sharing what little she had learned. She said yes to new opportunities, no matter how small. She learned to laugh again, even if sometimes the laughter was edged with sadness. One gray February morning, an email arrived that would change everything. The subject line was simple: opportunity. It was from Gregory Maddox's assistant, inviting her to coffee. She almost deleted it, assuming it was a mistake. But something told her to go. That meeting set in motion a chain of events no one could have predicted. For the first time in years, someone wanted to hear her ideas, not just see her smile or compliment her dress. Gregory listened, really listened, as Elena outlined her vision for rebuilding companies torn apart by ego and greed. He offered advice, connections, and eventually, a job. But even Gregory couldn't have predicted what would happen at the gala, when the whole world would see Elena not as a forgotten wife, but as the woman who refused to stay broken. Her comeback was just beginning. The Rose Crown Hotel was a palace disguised as a skyscraper, a place where old money and new ambition collided in a whirlwind of diamonds and whispers. For the Harrington Foundation Gala, every inch was transformed into a playground for the powerful. Crystal chandeliers hung like constellations, and red carpets snaked between marble columns, polished to a perfect shine. Every detail was choreographed: the soft jazz trio by the grand staircase, the towering floral arrangements at each table, even the scent of gardenias drifting on the air. The city's elite floated from group to group, each conversation a subtle negotiation, every handshake a potential deal. Billionaires swapped stories with actors, journalists hunted for rumors in the corners, and everyone eyed the seating chart for signs of scandal or shifting allegiances. The ballroom was full, but the buzz was electric. Something bigger than charity was happening tonight. Lucas Harrington worked the room with practiced ease, his smile never faltering. Alyssa Carter, perfectly poised at his side, played her role as future CEO with cool precision. Alyssa was a master of image. Her platinum blonde hair always sleek, her tailored white suit more striking than any ball gown. She never missed a detail. In every group, she made sure her name was repeated, her business acumen mentioned, her future position referenced with a sly wink or a strategic nod. Tonight, Alyssa was on the hunt, not just for validation, but for control. She wanted every investor, every rival executive to understand Lucas had chosen her, not just as a lover, but as his partner in power. Their whispers buzzed around her like bees, some admiring, some jealous, a few quietly sharpening knives. Lucas relished the attention, letting Alyssa take the spotlight while he lingered in the glow. He'd always liked being the kingmaker, the man whose word could make or break a career. Tonight was supposed to be his triumph. The perfect new woman, the seamless succession plan, the end of old ghosts. But Lucas couldn't stop glancing across the room at Elena. He'd spotted her as soon as she walked in. Part of him had expected her to show up. Elena never did what was expected, not for long. Still, the way she stood at Gregory Maddox's side, quietly confident, made him uneasy. Gregory was a legend among legends, a self-made billionaire, investor in everything from green energy to private spaceflight. He didn't waste time on weaklings. If Gregory had chosen Elena, it meant something. Elena felt the eyes on her, but she kept her focus on Gregory. Their conversation was quiet but intense. He quizzed her on her strategy for the new venture, pressed her for details about leadership and crisis management. Elena answered every question, sometimes surprising herself with how much she'd learned since her fall from grace. Gregory nodded, occasionally smiling, as if confirming a theory only he knew. Around them, The currents of the gala swirled. Waiters offered trays of caviar and champagne. A tech mogul and a senator argued about cryptocurrency at the bar. Two reality stars took selfies under the main chandelier, their laughter brittle and forced. The orchestra shifted from jazz to a sweeping waltz, and couples drifted to the dance floor, their movements choreographed as much by ambition as by music. In a quieter corner, the board members of Maddox Global Enterprises exchanged worried glances. Rumor had reached them. Gregory was about to make a major announcement. They wondered if it was true that he'd chosen a new CEO from outside their usual circle. One board member, an old rival of Gregory's, tried to corner Elena for a quick interrogation, but Gregory intervened, steering her back toward the main stage. Meanwhile, Alyssa and Lucas mingled near the VIP section. A photographer from a major business magazine approached, asking for a quote. Alyssa stepped forward, smiling with just the right amount of modesty. "I'm honored by Lucas's faith in me. The next chapter for Harrington Innovations will be defined by innovation, transparency, and bold leadership." Her words were rehearsed, but her eyes glimmered with ambition. As the flashbulbs popped, Lucas's gaze drifted again to Elena. For a moment, their eyes met. It was just a second, but it sent a chill through him. Elena didn't smile or look away. She met his stare, steady and unafraid. Lucas quickly turned back to Alyssa, but his heart pounded in his chest. The MC's voice broke through the music, calling everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have some very special announcements tonight. Please gather near the stage." A hush fell over the room as guests moved in, some with curiosity, some with suspicion. Lucas and Alyssa took their places at the front, standing tall under the lights. Gregory and Elena approached from the opposite side, flanked by Maddox's closest advisors. The stage was set, literally and figuratively, for a confrontation that would define careers and rewrite the pecking order of New York business. Whispers swept the crowd. Was there going to be a merger? Was Alyssa really taking over as CEO? And why was Elena, the discarded ex-wife, suddenly standing next to Gregory Maddox, the kingmaker? The tension was so thick it almost vibrated in the air. Lucas cleared his throat, ready to reclaim control. But before he could speak, Gregory Maddox raised his hand. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the silver-haired billionaire. "My friends," Gregory began, his voice low but powerful, "tonight is about new beginnings. It's about what happens when you bet on the underestimated, the resilient, the ones who refuse to stay silent in the face of loss." Elena stood at his side, head high, eyes bright. In that moment, she wasn't just Lucas's ex-wife or the woman who had once been left behind. She was the storm about to change everything. What none of them realized was that the gala was just the first battle. Behind the scenes, deals were being made, secrets uncovered, and old wounds prepared to reopen. And before the night was over, everyone in that room would be forced to choose a side. There's a strange electricity in the air right before a public betrayal, an invisible crackle that every guest at the Rose Crown Hotel felt as the gala's energy shifted. Moments before, people were still buzzing about Gregory Maddox's cryptic speech and the shock of Elena standing on his arm. But when Lucas Harrington moved back into the spotlight, something in his posture changed. He straightened his jacket, tightened his jaw, and his eyes grew cold. Alyssa clung to him, her smile dazzling for the cameras, but a certain nervousness flickered in her gaze. She could sense what was coming, even if she hoped it wouldn't be as brutal as the whispers promised. The MC, trying to recapture control, announced the next phase of the night. "It's time for our foundation's official succession announcement." Cameras swiveled toward Lucas and Alyssa. The crowd edged closer. Breaths held, champagne glasses suspended midair. Elena remained near the stage, flanked by Gregory Maddox and his trusted advisors, her presence a silent threat to anyone who'd ever underestimated her. Lucas gripped the microphone, his voice resonant but hard. "Thank you all for joining us on such an important night. I've worked my entire career to build Harrington Innovations into the powerhouse it is today. But no legacy stands still. The future is about transformation and about passing the torch to someone with true vision." He paused, turning slightly, signaling for Alyssa to join him in the center. Alyssa's heels tapped out a nervous rhythm as she walked to his side, her white suit almost glowing beneath the spotlight. "I'm honored to take on the role of CEO," she said, eyes darting to Lucas for reassurance. With Lucas's support and all of your trust, I know we'll reach new heights. The applause was polite, but not quite enthusiastic. People wanted more. They wanted spectacle. Lucas smirked, enjoying the tension. Then he did something that shocked even Alyssa. He leaned in and kissed her. Not a quick peck, but a lingering, possessive display. Flashbulbs exploded, guests gasped, and somewhere in the back, a woman let out a tiny, shocked laugh. The message was clear. Alyssa wasn't just a business partner. She was his new prize, his new queen. From her place near the stage, Elena felt the humiliation as if she'd been slapped. She watched the scene play out, every second etching itself into her memory. She'd known Lucas could be cruel, but this was public execution, an erasure of everything they'd built together. She clenched her hands, fighting the urge to run. But then something unexpected happened. A well-known journalist, sensing the story of the year, called out, "Mr. Harrington, care to comment on the rumors that your ex-wife was forced out of the company with nothing?" The crowd tittered, and Lucas's smile faltered for just a split second. He recovered quickly, raising an eyebrow. "Elena made her choices," he said, his tone dismissive. "I wish her well, but Harrington Innovations is moving forward." Alyssa forced another smile, but her cheeks burned. Even she understood the ugliness of the moment. For Elena, the words were a knife. In that instant, she realized there was no going back. Not to Lucas, not to her old life, not even to the woman she'd been before the divorce. Gregory Maddox stepped forward, his presence radiating calm power. "If I may," he said, "I'd like to offer my own perspective on the future." The MC hesitated, then surrendered the microphone. Gregory didn't bother to look at Lucas or Alyssa. He faced the crowd. "Resilience and integrity are more valuable than any balance sheet," he declared. "True leaders are forged not in comfort, but in the crucible of loss. That's why I'm proud to announce that Elena Grant will head our next global initiative, a $200 million project that will change the way we invest in women-led enterprises." This time, the applause was thunderous. Elena, caught off guard, blinked back tears she refused to let fall. Gregory put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We need visionaries who've survived the storm," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Not those who hide behind showmanship." Lucas looked like he'd been punched. Alyssa's smile finally cracked, eyes wide with panic as she realized she was no longer the center of attention. The investors who moments before had been courting Lucas now turned toward Elena, eager to shake her hand. The power in the room shifted as if a new wind had blown in, sweeping away old loyalties. But the public humiliation wasn't finished. As photographers scrambled to capture the real story, a former board member approached the stage, voice trembling with excitement. "I think the world deserves to know the truth," she said, waving a manila envelope. "Elena, do you want to tell everyone how your so-called amicable divorce really happened?" Lucas's face drained of color. Alyssa looked at him, suddenly afraid. Elena hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. Her voice was clear, steady. "Lucas didn't just leave our marriage. He engineered a takeover of my shares, leveraged private information to force me out, and tried to erase my contributions to Harrington Innovations. But tonight isn't about settling scores. It's about building something better. For every woman who's ever been told she's disposable, know this: you are not. And you never will be." The room erupted in cheers, tears, and an energy so fierce it felt like the start of a revolution. In that moment, Elena's humiliation transformed into power, and Lucas Harrington, for the first time in his life, looked truly afraid. The gala ended, but the humiliation did not. Elena moved through the crowd as if underwater, forced smiles and polite handshakes blending into a blur. She felt every glance, every whispered conversation, every look of sympathy or secret delight. It was as if the city itself was watching her unravel. By the time she made it outside, the air was thick with a summer storm, thunder grumbling over the skyline. Her phone vibrated with dozens of messages, some from old friends, some from reporters, and a handful from people she'd barely remembered, all offering shallow words. "Are you okay? Stay strong. You didn't deserve that." She shut the phone off, the words stinging instead of soothing. A black car pulled up to the curb. Gregory Maddox's driver opened the door, gesturing for her to get in. "Mr. Maddox wants to make sure you get home safe," the man said quietly. Elena nodded, sliding into the back seat, her breath trembling. For the first few blocks, she tried to keep herself composed, staring out at the streaked city lights. But the mask she'd worn all night was cracking. "Are you all right, Miss Grant?" the driver asked softly as they stopped for a light. Elena tried to answer, but her voice caught in her throat. She swallowed hard, the pressure behind her eyes finally bursting into silent tears. She turned away, pressing her forehead to the cool glass, letting the city blur beyond recognition. By the time she reached her apartment, her hands shook so badly she struggled with her keys. The tiny studio that had once felt like a safe haven now felt suffocating. She leaned against the door, sliding down to the floor, knees to her chest. For the first time since the divorce, she let herself fall apart. Sobs racked her body, each one echoing with the pain of betrayal, the loss of her old life, the gutting realization that nothing she'd given had ever truly been enough for Lucas. She thought of all the sacrifices, moving for his job, quitting her own, swallowing her opinions for the sake of peace. The years she spent building up his ego, quietly making introductions, smoothing over his mistakes, taking on the emotional labor of two people so Lucas could look like the perfect husband and CEO. And for what? To be tossed aside for someone newer, more convenient? To be erased from the company she'd helped create, forced to watch her replacement be crowned in front of all Manhattan? It wasn't just anger or humiliation. It was grief, pure and sharp, for the version of herself she'd lost somewhere along the way. For hours, she sat on the floor, tears soaking her sleeves, memories swirling like storm clouds. Her parents' laughter in their tiny apartment, her first job offer, the day she met Lucas, the night she found the texts on his phone. Every hope and heartbreak, every milestone and mistake collided inside her chest. At some point, her sobs quieted, replaced by a numb exhaustion. She stood, legs shaky, and washed her face. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Eyes red, skin blotchy, hair falling loose from its pins. She looked vulnerable, but beneath the pain, a different emotion flickered. Anger. Not the hot, destructive anger that leaves scars, but the kind that fuels change. She opened her laptop, her hands still trembling. She needed to do something, anything, to take back control. She started typing, pouring her story onto the screen, refusing to censor her own pain. She wrote about being forced out, about Lucas's manipulation, about the loneliness of starting over in a city that worshipped success but turned its back on failure. She wrote until the sky outside turned pale gray, the first light of dawn creeping through her window. Finally, exhausted, she closed the laptop and crawled into bed, curling into herself. But even as sleep dragged her under, she knew something had shifted. She had survived the worst night of her life. She was still here. And somewhere deep down, beneath all the heartbreak, a spark was reigniting. The next morning, Elena woke to find her phone buzzing with missed calls and emails. She ignored most of them, until she saw Gregory Maddox's name. She hesitated, her heart pounding, then pressed play on his voicemail. "Elena, it's Gregory. I know last night was brutal, and I know you're hurting, but listen. What happened at the gala? That's not the end of your story. It's the beginning. I meant what I said. You have vision, grit, and the kind of integrity this world needs. Take a day. Grieve. But when you're ready, call me. We have work to do." She listened to the message twice, letting his words sink in. For the first time since the divorce, Elena felt a tiny surge of hope. She wasn't alone. Someone believed in her, not because of her relationship to Lucas, but because of who she was, who she could become. She spent the day in quiet reflection, letting herself rest, forcing herself to eat something simple. In the afternoon, she went for a long walk through the city, letting the sights and sounds remind her of the life she'd built from nothing. She passed women hurrying to work, children laughing in the park, an old couple holding hands at a cafe. The city moved on, indifferent to her pain, but also full of promise. That night, she called Gregory back. Her voice was quiet, but strong. "I'm ready," she said. "Tell me what you need me to do." And with those words, Elena Grant took her first step out of the darkness. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew this. She would never let anyone write her story again. The morning after the gala felt different. The pain was still there, raw and aching, but Elena awoke to the quiet certainty that she had reached the bottom, and there was nowhere left to go but up. She moved through her tiny apartment in a new rhythm, slow, deliberate, but with purpose. The coffee tasted stronger. The sunlight through the window felt less cruel. She showered, changed into fresh clothes, and sat at her kitchen table with Gregory Maddox's business card in front of her. Gregory had called again. "Elena, let's have breakfast. Not as a billionaire and a rookie CEO, but as two people who know how it feels to be counted out. I want to hear your story, every detail." Elena almost declined. But something stubborn in her refused to hide. She needed to reclaim her voice. She met Gregory at a quiet cafe on the Upper West Side, far from the usual business haunts. He was waiting with coffee and croissants, looking more like a kindly grandfather than a financial titan. He listened, truly listened, as Elena recounted everything: her childhood, the years of sacrifice, the rise and fall of her marriage, the ruthless boardroom battles, the sting of being erased. Gregory nodded, never interrupting, occasionally jotting a note. By the end, his eyes glimmered with respect. "You know what I see?" he said, pushing a folder across the table. "I see a survivor. Someone who can turn pain into power. Elena, most people never recover from a public downfall. But you've already started. This city loves a comeback." He opened the folder, revealing a series of documents, project proposals, and a preliminary contract. "I want you to lead Maddox Global's new Women in Leadership Fund. You'll have a team, a real budget, and total autonomy. I'll clear the path. All I ask is that you bring your grit, your compassion, and your refusal to quit." Elena blinked, stunned. "Why me?" she whispered. "I'm not the obvious choice. My reputation is—" Gregory cut her off gently. "Your reputation is about to change. Besides, the world's full of obvious choices. I want the one everyone counted out. I want the fighter." She read through the project plans. The initiative would invest in women-owned startups, create scholarships for underprivileged girls, and offer legal support for women forced out of leadership roles. It was bold, ambitious enough to disrupt the whole industry. As Elena signed the contract, she felt something shift deep inside. For the first time since her marriage ended, she was building, not just surviving. She was in control, and her scars were her armor. But the real twist was still to come. After breakfast, Gregory leaned in. "There's one more thing, Elena. I know about the trust your grandmother left you, the one you kept hidden, even from Lucas. That's your seed money. Use it wisely, and never let anyone bully you into silence again." Elena froze, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "How did you?" Gregory smiled, almost mischievous. "You're not the only one with secrets. I did my homework. That trust is legally airtight. You don't need anyone's permission to use it. Not Lucas, not the board, not anyone. You're richer than you think, Elena. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Shock and relief washed over her. She had nearly forgotten the inheritance. A modest sum compared to Maddox's billions, but enough to fund years of legal battles, new ventures, or whatever she dared to dream. Her parents had always urged her to hide it, to use it only in times of true need. It was time. For the first time, Elena saw her past in a new light. Her sacrifices hadn't been for nothing. She had built connections, learned how to navigate the most dangerous social waters, and emerged with her integrity intact. Her skills, her empathy, her hard-won experience, they were her secret weapons. The rest of the week moved in a blur of meetings and late-night planning. Elena recruited her first hires: a brilliant young lawyer who'd left a toxic firm, a tech genius from a nonprofit, and a social media strategist who just won an award for crisis response. Together, they sketched out the launch campaign, the pitch deck, and the list of women-owned businesses to support first. Word of Elena's return spread quickly. Investors who had turned their backs at the gala now sent cautious emails, hinting at interest. Journalists who had written her off started to ask for interviews, smelling the scent of a redemption arc. And everywhere she went, women reached out. Old classmates, junior analysts, even strangers on social media, telling her how much her story meant to them. One evening, Elena received an anonymous tip, proof that Lucas had falsified documents to force her out of the company, and that Alyssa's rapid rise wasn't as legitimate as it appeared. The file included emails, boardroom recordings, and a draft of a memo Lucas had written but never sent. Elena sat with the evidence, her hands trembling, not with fear, but with the cold certainty that she now held the power to fight back. She met Gregory in his office, the city glowing behind them. "What should I do?" she asked. Gregory smiled, that same quiet confidence in his eyes. That's up to you. Do you want revenge, or do you want justice? Elena thought of every woman who'd been gaslit, erased, forced to start over. She thought of the humiliation, the nights alone, the secret inheritance she'd been taught to hide. She straightened her shoulders. I want to change the rules, she said, not just for me, but for everyone who's been told to sit down and stay quiet. Gregory grinned. That's the answer I was hoping for. Let's get to work. As Elena left Maddox Tower that night, the city felt new. She wasn't the forgotten wife anymore. She was a woman with a mission, armed with her truth, her team, and resources no one could steal from her. The comeback had begun, and for the first time, Elena Grant knew she couldn't be stopped. The city moved on, as cities do, but something had shifted beneath its glossy surface. Elena Grant, once cast aside, now moved with a sense of purpose that couldn't be faked. She arrived at Maddox Global's offices every morning before sunrise, her resolve hardening with every step. The world didn't know it yet, but a storm was brewing. The media had caught wind of her new role, and curiosity simmered. Tabloid writers speculated, Billionaire's ex back in the boardroom, while finance blogs asked, can Elena Grant stage a real comeback? The rumors only fueled Elena's determination. She ignored interview requests and profile pieces, focusing on her team and her mission. Inside the office, the atmosphere was electric. Elena brought her team together for daily strategy sessions, mapping out every step of the women's initiative. She wasn't just building a fund, she was creating a movement. Her phone buzzed constantly, offers of support, collaboration, investment. Gregory Maddox watched with pride as she handled every call, every crisis with calm authority. But the biggest twist remained hidden, known only to Elena and her tightest confidantes. Her secret inheritance. The trust from her grandmother, long untouched, gave her true independence. With Gregory's advice, Elena quietly moved those assets, investing in herself first. She bought a stake in a tech company that would serve as the backbone for the women-led business accelerator she planned. She funded scholarships, legal defense grants, and seed capital for entrepreneurs who reminded her of her younger self. As her power grew, so did the stakes. One afternoon, Elena's lawyer, a woman named Priya with a sharp wit and zero tolerance for injustice, burst into her office with new documents. Lucas's team is panicking, she said, waving a legal folder. They're trying to freeze your shares, spread rumors you're unstable, even leak stories about your divorce to the press. They know you have something on them. Elena's eyes flashed. Then we're getting close? Are we protected? Priya smiled. More than protected. We're ready to go on offense. Gregory suggested patience, but Elena knew the time was coming for a public move. She called a meeting of her inner circle. Priya, her tech lead Marissa, and media strategist Zoe. We don't just want to expose Lucas and Alyssa, Elena said, voice steady. We want to change how this city treats women in power. No more secrets, no more whisper networks. We'll do this on our terms. Her team nodded. They mapped out a press strategy, a legal offensive, and a charity gala, this time hosted by Maddox Global with Elena at the center. Let's flip the script, Marissa said. You walk in looking like you own the place. You don't ask for a seat at the table. You build a new table. The transformation was more than professional. It was deeply personal. Elena booked a session with a stylist, not to impress, but to armor herself. The stylist, a friend from her pre-divorce life, listened to her story in silence, then said, You don't need to look like anyone else. You just need to look like the woman you already are, a survivor, a leader, a force. Together they chose a look that was powerful but not cold. A sleek navy pantsuit, diamond stud earrings from her mother, and a signature bold lipstick. Her hair, once a symbol of her past, soft, safe, conventional, was now styled back in a sharp, confident updo. When Elena saw herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the reflection. She felt taller, stronger, almost invincible. As the night of the Maddox Global Gala approached, tension spread through the city's elite. Rumors swirled that Elena had new evidence against Lucas, that she was about to unveil a business model that would change the landscape forever. Investors who'd once sided with Lucas now hedged their bets, quietly reaching out to Elena for meetings. Journalists jockeyed for interviews, eager for the next chapter in the saga. On the night of the gala, Elena arrived not through the front door but via a private elevator. Gregory met her at the top floor. "Ready?" he asked. Elena smiled, her nerves steady. "I've never been more ready." The ballroom was dazzling, lights sparkling, cameras flashing, power players clustered in tight groups. Lucas and Alyssa, dressed to perfection, stood at the center, expecting to be the stars again. But as soon as Elena entered, the energy changed. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. For a moment, Lucas just stared. Alyssa's confident smile faded into a look of panic. The photographers rushed over, flashbulbs exploding, shouting, "Elena, over here!" Elena walked with Gregory to the main stage, the crowd parting before her. She looked out at the audience, at all the faces that had once ignored or dismissed her, and saw them watching, waiting. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence was statement enough. Gregory took the microphone. "Tonight, we celebrate visionaries, those who rise after the world has written them off. Elena Grant is one of those visionaries. She leads with courage, with integrity, and with a commitment to building a better future, not just for herself, but for every woman who's ever been silenced." The applause was thunderous. Elena stepped up to the microphone, her voice steady. "This isn't just my comeback. It's the start of something bigger. For too long, people like Lucas Harrington have played by their own rules, erasing, replacing, and humiliating the very people who helped them rise. Tonight, we change that. We lift each other up. We protect our own." As the cheers echoed, Lucas and Alyssa realized the narrative had shifted. Elena was no longer the victim. She was the storm. The twist was complete. The woman everyone counted out had returned, stronger, wiser, and with more power than ever. And the world was about to witness her next move. The night after the Maddox Global Gala, the city was buzzing with one question. Had anyone ever seen a comeback quite like Elena Grant's? The headlines were relentless. News outlets called it the redemption of the year. Fashion bloggers raved about her transformation, and even late-night talk show hosts referenced her speech. Elena's inbox overflowed, not just with congratulations, but with requests for interviews, investment, and partnerships. Her story resonated with thousands who had been cast aside, reminding them that defeat could become a weapon. Yet for Elena, it was never just about revenge. She woke up before sunrise as always, her mind whirring with ideas and plans. She stood before her window, watching the city's first golden rays touch the skyline. She saw a version of herself she'd almost forgotten, not just the survivor, but the builder, the dreamer, the leader. She was ready to rewrite her narrative, on her terms, for everyone to see. In the weeks that followed, Elena's team worked tirelessly. The Women in Leadership initiative launched with a burst of publicity. Within days, Maddox Global's fund was flooded with applications from young entrepreneurs and seasoned founders alike. Women who had faced their own betrayals and setbacks. Elena made it her mission to read every proposal personally, responding with genuine interest and encouragement. Her door was always open, her words always honest. Her approach was radically different from the cutthroat world she'd left behind. She held workshops on negotiation, confidence, and leadership. She mentored women from all backgrounds, from former rivals to single mothers rebuilding their lives. She spoke on panels, calling out the old guard for their outdated ways, but always offering a vision for a better, more inclusive future. Investors who had doubted her now scrambled for a seat at her table. CEOs who had once snubbed her now sought her approval. Meanwhile, Lucas Harrington and Alyssa Carter scrambled to maintain their grip on Harrington Innovations. Rumors swirled that the company's board was divided, that the recent publicity had spooked longtime investors. Alyssa's inexperience was showing. Her attempts to appear strong only highlighted her lack of genuine leadership. Lucas grew more irritable, snapping at staff and lashing out at reporters who questioned his decisions. Every press mention of Elena seemed to drain the color from Alyssa's face. Then came the morning when everything changed. Elena arrived at Maddox Global to find her team buzzing. "Did you see the papers?" Marissa, her tech lead, said, waving a copy of the Times. "Lucas and Alyssa are under investigation. The SEC is looking into their financials. Someone leaked the boardroom tapes." Elena took the paper, her hands steady. It wasn't gloating that she felt, but a fierce sense of justice. Her decision to share the evidence she'd received, quietly, through her lawyer, hadn't been about retribution, but about setting things right. For too long, people like Lucas had operated without consequence. That era was ending. Her phone rang. It was Gregory Maddox. "Are you ready for your next move?" he asked, his voice full of pride. "I am," Elena said. "Let's go public." They scheduled a press conference at the Maddox Tower. The invitations went out to every major media outlet, every board member, every business rival who had ever doubted her. Elena spent the night before rehearsing, not her lines, but her mindset. She wanted to speak as the woman she had become, calm, compassionate, and utterly unapologetic. When the day arrived, the lobby was packed. Elena entered wearing a navy suit, head held high, eyes bright with determination. Gregory introduced her as the face of a new era, and then stepped aside. Elena took the stage. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward, every eye on her. But she didn't flinch. "Thank you for being here," she began. "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's ever been forced to start over. Every woman who's been told to stay quiet. We're done being quiet." She laid out her vision for Maddox Global's initiative, its funding, its mission, its commitment to justice. She answered questions about Lucas and Alyssa without bitterness, only truth. She spoke openly about the obstacles she'd faced, the humiliation she'd endured, and the strength she'd found on the other side. "I am not here because of what was done to me," she finished. "I am here because I refused to give up, because I chose to believe in myself, even when no one else did. And now I will use my power to lift up others." The applause was overwhelming. Social media lit up with clips from her speech. Old friends and new allies reached out with messages of support. Her team beamed with pride. She was no longer the woman whose worth was measured by her husband's approval. She was her own force, rewriting the rules for everyone watching. That evening, Elena treated her team to dinner at a cozy restaurant overlooking the city. The mood was light, the laughter real. For the first time in years, Elena felt at home in her own skin. After dinner, she walked alone through the city, breathing in the cool night air. She passed landmarks that had once felt intimidating, now seeing them as symbols of everything she'd overcome. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from an old rival. It was just 2 words: "You win." Elena smiled, not out of triumph, but out of peace. She had nothing left to prove. She had rebuilt her life, her career, and her confidence from the ground up. And as she looked up at the stars glittering above the city, she knew this was only the beginning. Her comeback wasn't just personal. It was a signal to anyone who'd ever been written off. Your story isn't over. Sometimes the biggest victories begin the moment you decide to write your own ending. It wasn't just another charity gala. The Maddox Global Women's Leadership Summit had been the talk of New York for weeks, with a guest list that read like the Forbes 400 and a press presence that rivaled a presidential event. Elena Grant stood backstage, heart steady but adrenaline humming in her veins. This was it. Everything she had fought for, every humiliation, every sleepless night, every whispered doubt, had led to this moment. She wasn't alone. Her team, the same women who had lifted her up when the world turned its back, buzzed around her with final words of encouragement. Gregory Maddox, dressed in his signature tailored suit, gave her a nod. "Tonight, you don't just win for yourself," he murmured. "You win for all of us." The ballroom was dazzling. Crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, and rows of cameras ready to capture every second. Elena could hear the crowd beyond the curtain, hundreds of voices blending into a single current of anticipation. But another, quieter tension rippled through the hall. Lucas Harrington and Alyssa Carter were present, both looking polished but haunted. The investigation into their company had gone public. Whispers about financial misconduct and boardroom manipulation followed them everywhere they went. Alyssa clung to Lucas's arm, but her eyes darted anxiously. Lucas wore the brittle mask of a man who sensed his empire crumbling. When Elena walked on stage, the room went silent. No introduction was needed. Every guest, every journalist, every rival seemed to hold their breath as she took the microphone. "Thank you for being here," Elena began, her voice calm and resonant. "Tonight isn't about one person's victory. It's about the courage to stand up when you've been knocked down, and the power of community to build something better." She spoke not only of her journey, but of every woman who'd sent her messages of hope or stories of heartbreak. She detailed the progress of the Women in Leadership initiative. Companies launched, scholarships funded, careers rebuilt. She called out the city's old guard, not with bitterness, but with clarity and conviction. We all know the stories of women replaced, erased, or shamed into silence. But tonight, we're flipping the script. We're showing what's possible when you refuse to disappear. Thunderous applause followed. Elena saw tears in the eyes of some audience members. Her own voice trembled just a little with pride. She gestured to her team on stage, honoring their courage and resilience. This is what true leadership looks like. Not ego, not showmanship, but lifting each other up. As the applause died down, a moderator from a top business magazine joined Elena on stage. We've all heard rumors that tonight a major announcement is coming. Can you tell us more? Elena nodded. With Gregory Maddox's partnership, we are launching the Maddox Grant Foundation, a $1 billion fund to support women's businesses, education, and legal rights worldwide. It's the biggest initiative of its kind ever attempted. We want to make sure no woman is ever forced out in silence again. The room erupted. Even some of Lucas's former allies leapt to their feet, clapping and cheering. For Alyssa and Lucas, it was a public reckoning. They could only watch as Elena was embraced by the same world that had once cast her out. But the real showdown was yet to come. After the official program, guests mingled over dessert, and the media crowded Elena for interviews. Lucas, refusing to be ignored, pushed through the crowd with Alyssa at his side. "Elena," he said, his voice tight but forced into politeness for the cameras. "Congratulations. You certainly know how to work a room." Elena met his gaze, calm and unflinching. "It's not about working a room, Lucas. It's about building something that lasts, something that doesn't need to destroy others to exist." Alyssa's voice trembled as she tried to reclaim her former confidence. "You're very lucky, Elena. Most people don't get a second chance." Elena turned to her, soft but firm. "It's not luck, Alyssa. It's hard work, honesty, and refusing to let other people define you. I hope you find your own strength someday." A hush had fallen. Cameras caught every word. Reporters scribbled furiously, recording the exchange that would headline every news outlet by morning. But Elena didn't stay to bask in victory. She returned to her team, embracing each woman and thanking them for their loyalty. Gregory Maddox raised his glass for a toast. To Elena Grant, the woman who proved that dignity, vision, and courage will always outlast greed and arrogance. After the summit, Elena found herself outside under the city's glittering lights. The cool air was refreshing, and for the first time in years, she felt light. She had nothing left to prove to Lucas or Alyssa, or anyone who had doubted her. She had turned public humiliation into public triumph. A group of young women, attendees from the event, approached her. "You changed our lives tonight," one said, voice trembling with emotion. "We believe in ourselves now because you showed us how." Elena hugged them, promising to stay in touch. She meant it. As she walked through the city, she realized her story was bigger than revenge or even redemption. It was a rallying cry for everyone who had ever been cast aside. She had shattered the old narrative and written her own, a story of survival, power, and hope. And as the city pulsed with energy behind her, Elena Grant smiled, ready for whatever would come next. She was no longer anyone's ex-wife. She was a leader, a champion, a symbol for a new era. The morning after the Maddox Grant Foundation Summit, Elena Grant woke to a new world. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from strangers thanking her for her courage, media requests pouring in, and most importantly, stories from women everywhere sharing their own battles and victories. It wasn't fame she felt, but a sense of responsibility and a kind of quiet joy she'd never known before. In her sunlit apartment, Elena stood before the window, sipping coffee, reflecting on how far she'd come. The city was already in motion, but for once, she let herself stand still and breathe. She remembered the lonely nights after her divorce, the days she doubted herself, the weight of shame and betrayal. But those memories no longer had the power to hurt her. They were just stepping stones on the path to something greater. Her first meeting of the day was with her core team at Maddox Global. They gathered in the boardroom, Marissa, Priya, Zoe, and the others, each of them living proof that resilience and unity could move mountains. Elena looked around the table and smiled. "Thank you," she said softly. "None of this would exist without your belief. I hope you know you've changed lives, starting with mine." Marissa grinned, her eyes shining with pride. You gave us the chance, Elena. You showed us how to rise again. Zoe chimed in. We all did this together. That's what makes it different. That's why it will last. As they discussed next steps for the foundation, Elena made one thing clear. This wasn't the end, just the beginning. We will invest in women who dare to disrupt, support those who need a lifeline, and speak up for those who aren't yet able to speak for themselves. Our legacy will be measured not by headlines, but by the ripple effects of every woman we lift up. Later that day, Elena agreed to her first in-depth interview since the summit. The reporter, a young woman from a national magazine, was nervous at first, but Elena's warmth soon put her at ease. People want to know, the reporter asked, what would you say to women who feel like their stories don't matter, who are afraid to start over? Elena considered this for a moment, choosing her words with care. I would say your story is never over. Not until you decide it is. Pain, betrayal, loss, these don't define us. What defines us is what we do next. The world will try to tell you to stay small, to stay quiet. Don't listen. You are stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and more powerful than anyone expects. Your value is not tied to anyone's approval, relationship, or bank account. It comes from within. The quote went viral, shared by millions, sparking conversations in offices, living rooms, and classrooms across the country. Women who had been silent found their voices. Some started businesses. Others left toxic relationships. Many simply stood up a little taller, knowing they weren't alone. Meanwhile, the fallout at Harrington Innovations continued. With their misconduct exposed, Lucas and Alyssa were removed from the company. The board brought in new leadership, this time with a focus on inclusion and transparency. The empire Lucas had built on secrets and arrogance crumbled, but out of the ashes, a new, more ethical company emerged. Elena didn't gloat. Instead, she sent a simple email to the new CEO, offering her support and resources for building a better future. She meant it. She had no interest in revenge. Her victory was in her own growth and in opening doors for others. The Maddox Grant Foundation quickly became a powerhouse, its programs replicated in other cities and countries. Elena traveled, speaking to crowds both large and small, always returning to the same message. We are unbreakable when we stand together. Your story matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. At a leadership conference in Chicago, she met a young mother who approached her with tears in her eyes. Because of you, I went back to school. I started my own business. I believe in myself now. Elena hugged her, realizing that every hardship she'd endured had given her the strength to lift others. It was more than redemption, it was a calling. Back in New York, Elena's life found a new rhythm. She cherished her independence, her friendships, and the simple joys that once seemed lost. Reading a book by the window, walking through Central Park, sharing laughter over dinner with her team. Her heart was open, but she didn't need validation from anyone else. She knew her worth. One afternoon, she received a letter from her former mother-in-law. It was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Dear Elena, it read, I watched your speech. I see now what my son never did. Thank you for reminding us all that kindness and strength can coexist. I wish you happiness, always. Elena smiled as she folded the letter. Life had come full circle, not in the way she'd once imagined, but in a way that was real, earned, and deeply meaningful. That evening, as the city lights flickered on and the world hustled by, Elena took to her balcony. She raised a glass, not in anger, not in spite, but in gratitude. For every fall, every failure, every moment that forced her to become more than she ever thought possible. Her final words in the documentary about her journey became a rallying cry for millions. If you're watching this and you feel small or broken, know this. You are not alone. You are not weak. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the very thing that sets you free. Do not wait for someone to save you. Stand up, speak up, write your own ending, and make it legendary. As the screen faded to black, the world was left not just with Elena's story, but with a challenge, a hope that every woman would see herself as the hero of her own life. Because in the end, it wasn't just about winning, it was about rising together. So the story has ended, and our wonderful friends, are you still here with us until now? If you are, I believe something about Elena's journey has touched your heart in some way. What does her story really tell us? Sometimes, the greatest loss is exactly what leads us to our most authentic power. Like Elena, we may be betrayed, overlooked, or forced to start over from nothing. But as heterodox wisdom teaches, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Every pain can become the source of your strength. Every ending can be a new beginning, if you have the courage to rise. If this story moved you, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment, share your thoughts or your own journey, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's stand together, inspire each other, and remember, your story isn't over. You are unbreakable, and you have the power to write your own ending.